Hello everyone, it's Oliver Graves, and I'm here to talk with you today about the NBC miniseries House of Frankenstein, 1997.
Vampires, werewolf.
Their only natural predator's God.
Frankenstein's loose in LA.
Untitled House of Frankenstein.
So first, to give you a little bit of a history on miniseries, they were an idea that networks had to get you to watch something to pump you full of commercials. Typically the idea with a network show is you'll come back once a week, watch a 22-minute to 44-minute show with commercials, and you'll be there every week getting exposed to advertising. Sometimes what a network would do is they would have a TV movie, a one chance in the night to see a movie that they produced, lower quality but 2 hours long, to capture your interest for more advertising. Miniseries were a way to capitalize on the one chance idea of a TV movie and also be a bit more episodic. So they think they would get you again another night, maybe 2 nights in a row, or get you to come back on a night you wouldn't normally watch. Maybe you'd watch Tuesday and then come back again Thursday. Other weird gimmicks, just have them run throughout the whole week, an hour every single night. They did lots of various different plays on this. Different networks did their own thing. Some running very long, some running fairly short. I do remember one time ABC did an event night with Waterworld, one of my favorite movies, where they added deleted scenes from the movie, but it was going to make it so long that they actually split it into a mini-series event where you had to watch it across 2 nights, which is a great way to sort of capture the audience for a while. House of Frankenstein 1997 bought into this idea that you would come back again and watch the second part of the 2-part series. It was about a 3-hour series, but with commercials they could pump it in. House of Frankenstein 1997 was a 168-minute movie. House of Frankenstein 1997 was 168 minutes, which they split into 2 parts, 2 88 some odd minute parts, full. Just gonna do a bunch. House of Frankenstein 1997 was a 168 minute miniseries that they split across 2 nights, coming out after Halloween on November 2nd and November 3rd in 1997, of course, making it over 4 hours with commercials and everything. Those 2 nights in 1997 was a Sunday and Monday night. Sometimes kind of a lighter night for ratings, but trying to pull you in rather than doing it on Halloween when people might actually be busy doing Halloween-like activities. House of Frankenstein, as it was called, used 1997 in the promotional considerations, wasn't necessarily actually called House of Frankenstein 1997, though it does help differentiate it from the universal release from the 40s, House of Frankenstein, the follow-up to the Wolfman meets Frankenstein? Frankenstein meets the Wolfman? Which also had a sequel, House of Dracula. This is its own piece. It is not actually connected to those franchises, although it is a little bit, since it deals with the same elements. It crosses over a werewolf, a vampire, and of course, Frankenstein, or Frankenstein's monster, the creature, as most people would call it. If you're checking this video out and you're looking for new information because you're an old fan of this miniseries, I'm sorry, I don't have anything for you. I'm mostly just going to be reviewing it. It's a very obscure piece. I was even just trying to look up if it ever got a VHS release as part of miniseries that NBC, ABC, CBS, and Fox would do one way to make more money off of them is you release them on video, and then of course later DVD. I don't know that this piece ever got an official DVD release, or for that matter a VHS release, like the more educational films like The Odyssey, which I remember watching at school, getting, or the less educational and very daunting Langoliers, like Stephen King. But it's a curious piece in monster movie franchise history, as it's padded out as much as it could be, but it does do the crossover thing, as it's fun to see these characters interact. So let me talk more about the movie itself. It is long. It does have what I would call, as I've referred to as padding. It is a cop drama that they try to intersect with the monsters that they are advertising. The Midnight Raptor is this mysterious serial killer murderer thing that the cops are trying to investigate in the Law and Order type environment that they have. Raptor, of course, trying to play off of the Universal Studios dinosaur hype. The vampire in the mini-series movie, I don't know what I'm going to call it. I gotta call it something. In this movie, it is not Dracula, but it is its own design. It is a unique character for this, as well as the werewolf. It's not connected to Talbot or other werewolf type from the past. However, the Frankenstein one is explicitly referred to as Frankenstein. They do use that name, which is public domain, so there's no qualms about them having to say it. Although I believe they could say Dracula, it's also public domain. The story goes with the murders happening, trying to chase this trail. There's also this very roguish werewolf type guy that's out there, and he incidentally is doing what he needs to do to be a werewolf. I'm trying to do all this from memory, and let me say that it's very foggy because the first half of this series is not very good. It takes a long time for it to get anywhere, but I will say the Frankenstein or monster scenes are really the scene stealers. The Frankenstein monster is unfrozen and then suddenly free. There is some connection to the creator being murdered by a vampire and trying to have all these stories intersect in some way. The Frankenstein's monster is played by Peter Crombie, who you might know as Crazy Joe Davola from the Seinfeld series. He wore a Pagliacci makeup in one episode and is known for being a little off-kilter and interrupts Jerry's pilot recording. He is very good in this role. The makeup is so caked on, but he still is able to play it. So the story goes on with an unfrozen Frankenstein walking around trying to adapt to modern day life. This sort of weird douchebag werewolf guy who is hunting a woman scratches her, and then suddenly she starts to have heightened senses. She starts to become a werewolf, and then the cop trying to track down the murderers and keeping a close eye on this very rich person who is involved with a club known as the House of Frankenstein. Wonder where they got that club name idea. The story drags on, eventually starting to have more of these characters cross over and meet, as the detective cop guy is involved with our new werewolf, as the original werewolf is killed off. And then we lead to our vampire finding the Frankenstein monster, calling him a brother, wanting him to be with him, but the monster rejects him. This leads to the arrest of the Frankenstein monster, giving him now an interview by all kinds of police and psychologists, trying to get to the bottom of just what is he and who is this guy. And then we have our werewolf woman who is starting to get a handle of her powers, who starts dating the vampire, mostly against her will, but it seems that he can kind of have some kind of power over werewolves. But the murders aren't stopping, as there's sort of vampire play at work. The cop is getting afraid of what's happening. He's starting to believe. There is a believer, played by C.C.H. Pounder. I do this from memory because I'm supposed to know this stuff. CCH Pounder you may recognize or may not recognize as the Queen in Avatar, plays the mother of Zoe Saldana's character. It's a name that stands out. It's a name I've always remembered in trivia questions. But she starts giving advice on how to deal with a vampire. And the problem being with this vampire is he's very jealous because the werewolf woman was dating the cop. And, well, there can only be one true love, right? Eventually it all leads to a big crossover at the mansion after many special effects scenes, including helicopter and a truck explosion, to what I find a very memorable scene of a dead vampire that Frankenstein's monster is building a fire to burn, and he diligently is ready to burn the vampire alive, but of course he wasn't quite dead. With the cop and the werewolf woman trying to get to the bottom of it at the club, reveals he's alive. And what does he do when he finds out that she is in love with him? In the most goth and emo fashion, being the truest edgelord vampire he could be, he commits suicide. A very anticlimactic ending to a very long monster crossover. I sum up the story as simply as I can. It is very long, though. It's coming around close to 3 hours long and around 170 minutes almost. I do want to say that the makeup in this is very well done. They only did makeup for the vampire transformation, which he goes from the normal, traditional, pale man, but then turns into a half bat-like creature, like a demon. And they do the transformation sequence very quickly, but the makeup is very nice. I love what they did with it. Then there's also the Frankenstein monster makeup, which is caked on pretty well and done in its own way. They're not trying to replicate the Boris Karloff look, which is very iconic, but it is a registered trademark look. You have to kind of do your own stitch and everything. So he has kind of a brown zombie appearance, and I think the actor who played him does a very good job. I will say the wardrobe is lacking. They seem to just have access to whatever Law and Order cop show was around, and with most Hollywood problems, whatever wardrobe they had, that's what they have. That's it. There's no expense that could be paid to get something better, as the Frankenstein monster just wears kind of a blue shirt and just regular pants throughout the whole thing. That actor, whenever he showed up, he was just going to be told to put that on. Anything else, continuity error, I guess. I would have liked something a little bit more iconic, a little bit more dressed. No, I wasn't going to want them to do exactly what another one did, but maybe something a little bit more identifiable. The werewolf transformations are very simple, cheap on CGI, but they didn't do them with makeup. They just used a dog or a wolf. There's 2 werewolves in it. There's the original, and then there is the newly made one. Our werewolf is played by Terry Polo, who you may know from the Fockers movies, Meet the Parents, the Ben Stiller movies, where she just kind of plays a wife. Doesn't really do much there, but you can see she actually is an actress and knows how to act in this film. She does a very good job of sort of obtaining superpowers and becoming sort of half werewolf. They indicate when she's in the human form that she can hear better, smell better, almost like Wolverine or something. Our vampire is played by Greg Wise. He's a very good character actor. I think he might have been wrong for the role. Nothing against the actor. He's good at being a little bit creepy, but he doesn't have a very good romanticized feeling. But then again, I think that's what they were going for. He was very LA. He's a little too generic for my taste. Again, not to insult you, Greg Wise. I think that is what they were going for. And he does it quite well, but I was just hoping for a little bit more. Again, not enough flair with the outfits, not enough flair with the dialogue. But they do not have this vampire be killed by sunlight, which I think is a good move. I like when they can move about in sunlight, but they're just a bit more limited. The lead, the cop that's pushing us through this whole story, is played by Adrian Pasdar, who you might know as the recent voice of Tony Stark in many Avengers-related media. He carries through this project well. He is a somewhat fun, I mean, I can be picky, but he's a fun actor to watch go through all this as he plays the skeptic and also realist trying to get through all of this. But then also he's caught up in this love triangle as he was dating our now werewolf woman, and of course the vampire is interested in her. The story ends in a somewhat of a cliffhanger as CCH Pounder's character is trampled by our werewolf, which, as we know, this is what causes werewolves in this world. And there's other vampires out there, as our lead was not the only one. There was a whole house of them in a club. So there's still one on the loose, and we leave our Frankenstein monster out and about in the world. However, with all these sequel hooks, it was never given a sequel. In fact, as far as I know, this didn't really air very much. It was kind of a one and done deal. And it's still stuck in my mind. I managed to rewatch this. Boy, is it hard to sit through. I'm not trying to belittle the picture that much, but it is very padded. Hopefully less padded than this video. The means to which I acquired it was through looking it up on the internet. There were no commercials the way I watched it, which maybe that's the way it was intended to be seen. With a bunch of car commercials and soda commercials and whatever else they could put in it to make sure you're really getting that tension from all these breaks.
Welcome to Los Angeles, home to over 7 million people, where everyone enjoys the sunshine and no one goes out at night.
Alive and not alive, human and inhuman.
It wasn't a man, it was an animal.
What kind of animal?
It was a werewolf.
Man's 3 most feared predators have returned.
Vampires, werewolves, Frankenstein, loose in L.A.
Legendary evil has found a new home
Their only natural predator is God.
in the city of angels.
I don't think he's human, and he's taking out my city.
To stop them, he'll have to believe in them.
Don't fight what you know, detective, even if it doesn't make any sense.
Do you have any crosses in the house?
Now,
We gotta get out of there. There's somebody coming.
NBC presents a motion picture event of undying proportions. House of Frankenstein. Violent scenes, parental discretion advised.
I have to say, for seeing this just once, it really stuck in my mind. It's something that really kind of made me realize I like horror and I like these things. Because the ending with the Frankenstein monster dealing with the big vampire body and then the werewolf getting away at the end, all of these elements stuck with me. The helicopter chase, the car explosion, all those other things which you've seen, these were stunts they've probably done before in other TV shows and movies, didn't stick out with me because, let's be honest, we've probably all seen that kind of thing dozens if not hundreds of times. But how many times have you seen these characters cross over and have these sort of mythologies and other elements? Looking back on the piece, I think the Frankenstein monster scenes, those ones stick out the most. I feel like those are the ones the writers put the most work into, the directors, the actors. I mean, it was probably the highest budget. They're very true to what most people know of the Frankenstein monster, which is not a lumbering murderer. They keep him very humble and gentle, has cute interactions with children, and is really just a kind heart and wants to do the right thing. He doesn't want to hurt anybody. The werewolf is played more neutral, which again, I love. I love that the werewolf isn't necessarily a good guy, but isn't necessarily a bad guy. It tries to play both sides. However, in this one, they play it a little bit too misogynistic and kidnapping, where she doesn't really seem to have as much free will as it would like her to have. And of course, the vampire is the villain, the main villain, sort of this grand master of orchestrating all this, trying to pull all these pieces together. He's fascinated with this undead man out there. He's using werewolves at his command. It's become a tradition in many medias with monsters to have them cross over and to copy what the original House of Frankenstein and House of Dracula did by having these 3 characters cross over. I do appreciate this piece for doing that, but for the most part, I wish it did a little less to do a little more. It's something to be said, less is more, but that is the medium that they were making at the time, which was miniseries. They wanted you to watch for as long as possible and to come back. And the second part really does have more in it than the first part. Ultimately, House of Frankenstein 1997 is a very obscure piece. Trying to find information on it, I really couldn't find anything. I think I'm going to be one of the only videos or content out there regarding this piece. I do wonder what some of the actors think, what the writers think, if there's any longevity to it. It doesn't really have a cult following. It doesn't really have anything else going on for it. It's just this very obscure thing that very few people remember, but it had a very big impact on me. If you think you could sit through it, I would recommend it just out of plain curiosity. I don't think that this will ever be getting a Blu-ray release. It just didn't connect with people. Maybe that's what happens when you release it after Halloween, but I want to say that I hope that becomes more of a tradition. I have no problem with seeing Halloween stuff carry right into November, but at the same time, a lot of people, it's already kind of come and gone. I do wonder if NBC had higher hopes for House of Frankenstein 1997, if it would be something they air every year, if it would get a sequel, if it would get a spin-off series. Unfortunately, the most interesting characters usually are the most expensive characters. Human characters wearing plain clothes are what you can fill most programs with. Heavy makeup, CGI effects, those aren't things you can necessarily make a series out of, especially back then. But I can't praise the makeup enough. It is something that was very well done. There was definitely care and attention to detail done for both the demonic vampire transformation and the Frankenstein monster. And also the actors playing those parts while in heavy makeup. And they do long scenes and full body makeup at times. That's what probably makes me so upset about the wardrobe decision for the Frankenstein monster, because it is very jarring. There's something funny about seeing him wearing a regular shirt and trying to be a regular person. Not that I wanted to see him wearing decaying, gross clothes, but maybe something that would fit him or make him feel a little bit more like a character. But if you ever find yourself with 3 hours and maybe a few friends and maybe a few drinks, I would say yes. Check it out if you are a horror fan, or at least a classic horror fan. If not just to see some of those good scenes, they're very worth it to me. So let me know, are you someone that saw House of Frankenstein 1997 when it first aired like I did? Were you there November 2nd and November 3rd? Although honestly, I don't remember watching the first part, but I definitely remember watching the second. Or are you someone who's like me, is trying to find out more information on this obscure piece? Certainly it was budgeted just for NBC, just for to tie in to Halloween. But maybe they had higher hopes. Maybe there's more. Maybe the House of Frankenstein is still out there. But like, if all you have to do to make another werewolf is like step on him or scrap, why doesn't he just go around making tons of other werewolves? Like, you could just make so many, like, in the course of a day. He could like go to a dog park or like a regular park, scratch a bunch of children. Like an epidemic, like, and they could make more. I don't know.